My dear brothers and sisters, healing is not a thunderstorm. It is the sunrise, gentle, certain, and sure. It does not announce itself with fanfare or spectacle. It arrives quietly, bringing light to places you once thought would forever remain in shadow. Sometimes you believe you are still broken simply because you no longer feel the intensity of pain. But healing, my loves, is not always felt, it is lived. The first sign that you've healed more than you realize is when your heart no longer seeks revenge, but understanding. Once, your mind replayed old hurts, trying to make sense of them, trying to make them fair. But now, you breathe differently. You no longer chase explanations, you seek peace. That, my dear, is growth. Choosing harmony over justification, choosing peace over being right. The second sign is when silence no longer feels like loneliness. There was a time when being alone felt like being abandoned. But now you sit with yourself and find comfort there. You realize that your company is enough, that your soul is a garden worth tending. You no longer run from stillness. You rest in it. That is not weakness, that is wisdom. The third sign is when you can speak about your pain without tasting bitterness. The story remains the same, but the ache has softened. You can share what once broke you without breaking again. That is the miracle of healing. It transforms wounds into wisdom, tears into testimony, sorrow into song. The fourth sign is when you find joy in the smallest of things. The way the sun kisses your face in the morning, the laughter of a child in passing, the sound of rain on your window. Suddenly, you notice beauty again. You no longer live in survival mode, you live in awareness. You have learned to breathe fully, to receive the sweetness of ordinary life. The fifth sign is when you set boundaries without guilt. Once upon a time, you would have sacrificed your peace to please others. But now, you understand that love without respect is not love at all. You protect your space not out of anger, but out of understanding that sacred things deserve care, including you. And the sixth sign, my dear, is when you can look at the past and bless it, not because it was kind, but because it taught you. You can say, yes, that hurt me, but it also shaped me. It also grew me. The bitterness that once bound you no longer controls you. You stand with gratitude, not for the pain, but for the wisdom it birthed. Healing is not an event, it is a journey. It is a quiet unfolding, a returning home to yourself. You may not see it every day, but one morning, you'll look in the mirror and realize you are no longer who you were, and that is the most beautiful truth of all. My dear brothers and sisters, healing is not a thunderstorm that shakes the sky or splits the earth in two. It is the sunrise, gentle, patient, and sure. It comes softly, touching the darkness with golden fingers until light finds its way into the deepest corners of your soul. Healing does not demand your attention with noise. It whispers quietly as it mends what once felt shattered beyond repair. It is a sacred process, one that unfolds when you least expect it. Sometimes, you do not even recognize it happening, for healing is not always a feeling. It is a becoming. You may think you are still broken because you cannot feel the same joy you once knew, but often that is because your heart is learning a quieter kind of peace. Healing is not loud. It is steady, graceful, and deeply human. The first sign that you've healed more than you realize is when your heart no longer burns for revenge, but beats for understanding. Once, you might have replayed old conversations in your mind, hoping to rewrite them, wishing for closure that never came. You might have carried resentment like a shield, thinking it would protect you from further harm. But now you find yourself letting go. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start saying, what did this teach me? You no longer seek to punish, you seek to understand. You have discovered that peace is far greater than vindication, and that forgiveness does not mean weakness. It means freedom. You realize that holding anger only keeps you tied to what hurt you, while understanding allows you to rise above it. When you reach this point, you will notice that your breathing changes. You exhale with ease. You stop chasing closure and start creating calm. You no longer carry the weight of explanations you'll never receive. You learn to release the need to prove anything. That is growth in its purest form, choosing peace over pride, compassion over control. You may not recognize it at first, but that moment when you stop needing others to see your pain and instead simply wish them well from afar is the moment your soul has found healing. This shift doesn't happen in one grand moment. It comes through countless quiet choices. It comes through nights when you choose rest instead of replaying memories. It comes through mornings when you choose gratitude instead of grief. Healing hides in those small, unseen victories, the times you respond with grace instead of anger, the moments you walk away instead of engaging in chaos. You are no longer at war with what was, you are learning to make peace with what is. So when your heart no longer seeks to win, when your spirit no longer aches to be understood, and when your silence no longer feels heavy but sacred, that is healing. That is power. That is the divine strength of a soul that has risen from its own ashes, not to seek vengeance, but to stand in peace. There comes a time, my dear, when silence no longer feels like punishment. It no longer echoes with loneliness or reminds you of what is missing. Instead, it becomes a sanctuary, a space where you can finally hear yourself again. Once upon a time, the quiet was unbearable. It reminded you of the laughter that faded, the voices that left, and the love that no longer stayed. The absence of noise felt like the absence of worth. You would fill your days with distractions, conversations, or endless scrolling, anything to escape the sound of your own thoughts. But somewhere along this journey, something changed. You began to sit in the stillness and realize that silence isn't emptiness. It is presence. It is your spirit speaking softly beneath the noise of the world. When you start to find peace in your own company, it is one of the clearest signs that you've healed more than you realize. You no longer seek constant validation or company to feel whole. You start to appreciate moments where you can simply be, without needing to prove, perform, or please. You begin to see that solitude is not the same as isolation. It is sacred space. You light a candle, you breathe deeply, and you understand that being alone doesn't mean you are unloved. It means you are learning to love yourself differently. There is power in that realization, quiet and profound. Once, your worth was measured by the attention of others, by how many people called, cared, or stayed. But now you've learned that self-worth does not depend on external presence. You have learned to be your own witness, your own comfort. You've become your own friend. In your solitude, you discover clarity that noise once covered. You begin to listen to your body, to your intuition, to the whispers of your heart that once went unheard beneath the weight of trying to belong. You start to notice your own rhythm, your own breath, and how beautiful it is to move through life without needing an audience. This is not a lonely existence. It is a sacred homecoming. It is where you discover your power, your peace, your wholeness. You stop running from yourself and start running toward your truth. The moments once filled with fear of being forgotten are now filled with gratitude for being found. By you start to fill your silence with creativity, reflection, laughter that comes from within. You realize that solitude is not a void but a vessel, holding all the strength you were too distracted to see. When you no longer fear your own thoughts, when the quiet feels like peace instead of punishment, when your heart finds rest in the sound of its own rhythm, you have healed. You may not have shouted it to the world, but you have grown in the deepest, most meaningful way. You have learned that your own company is not something to escape, but something to honor. That is healing in its most graceful form. There is a quiet beauty in the moment you can speak about your pain without trembling. Once your story was heavy on your tongue, each word like a stone too sharp to touch. You carried your memories like fragile glass, afraid that if you spoke of them, they would cut you again. The past was a wound you kept hidden, a secret shadow you walked with, pretending not to notice its weight. But healing, my dear, has a way of softening the edges. It does not erase the story. It changes how it lives within you. The same story that once broke your heart becomes the one that reminds you how strong that heart truly is. There was a time when you could not even think of what happened without feeling it all over again. The betrayal, the loss, the fear, the shame. Your voice would crack under the burden of memory. You avoided certain places, certain names, certain songs because they held too much of what you were trying to forget. But healing came quietly. It didn't rush in like a storm, it came in gentle waves, washing over you until one day you noticed the water no longer hurt. You could finally speak the words that once silenced you. You could tell your story not as a victim, but as a survivor. That is the moment your soul takes its first deep breath in freedom. When you reach this point, your pain no longer defines you. It refines you. You begin to see that every scar carries wisdom, every tear watered a seed of strength. You no longer tell your story to seek pity, you share it to inspire understanding. The bitterness that once lived inside you begins to dissolve, replaced by compassion. You look back and realize that the people who hurt you were not stronger than you. They were lost within their own storms. You forgive, not to excuse them, but to release yourself from the grip of what was. That release, that lightness, is healing manifesting in your spirit. You notice you can talk about what happened without your chest tightening. The memories no longer pull you backward. They simply exist as part of your history, not your present. You have made peace with your pain. You can now speak your truth calmly without tears clouding your eyes. It no longer burns. It teaches. You share your story with gentleness, knowing someone out there needs to hear it, someone who still believes they will never heal. Your words become a bridge for others to cross from hurt to hope. To speak of your pain without feeling it consume you is not forgetting. It is transforming. It is turning wounds into wisdom and heartbreak into grace. You are no longer bound by your past. You are guided by it. That, my dear, is when you know you have healed more than you ever realized. There comes a time when you begin to notice joy returning to your life, not in grand celebrations or loud moments, but in the quiet beauty of simple things. The morning sunlight streaming through your window feels different. It no longer just wakes you, it warms you. The laughter of a child in passing stirs something soft inside you. The sound of rain tapping against your roof feels like music again. Once, you were too tired to notice such things, too wrapped in the weight of your wounds to see the small miracles all around you. But now your heart beats differently. You feel yourself slowing down, breathing more deeply, noticing life in all its gentle details. That is a sign of deep healing, when your soul begins to find joy again in what once went unseen. For so long, you might have lived in survival mode, doing what you needed to simply make it through the day. You woke up, carried your pain quietly, and tried to smile through it. The world moved fast, and you tried to keep up, even when your spirit begged for rest. But now, something has shifted. You have learned that joy does not always come from fixing everything. It comes from accepting what is and choosing gratitude anyway. You start to find contentment not in perfection but in presence. You no longer need everything to be right to feel peace. You simply allow yourself to feel thankful for the moment as it is. You begin to see that healing is not about erasing sadness, it's about learning to make room for joy beside it. You can hold both, the ache and the appreciation, the loss and the laughter. You no longer wait for some future day when everything will be perfect. You realize that happiness can exist right here, even in the midst of imperfection. The beauty of healing is that it opens your eyes to life's smallest blessings. The smell of coffee in the morning, the feeling of warm water over your hands, the quiet hum of the night. These things, once overlooked, now feel sacred. You are finally present. This shift does not mean you have forgotten your pain. It means your pain no longer blinds you. It means the world feels colorful again after being gray for too long. You may smile for no reason. You may catch yourself humming a tune without knowing when you started. You may find yourself looking forward to something, even something small. And in that moment, you'll realize you are alive in a way you haven't been in a long time. To find joy again after pain is one of life's greatest triumphs. It means your spirit has begun to breathe freely again. It means that love, peace, and wonder have made their way back into your heart. You have not just survived. You have begun to truly live, There is a quiet strength that comes when you begin to set boundaries without guilt. It is the moment you realize that saying no is not cruelty, it is clarity. There was a time when you gave too much of yourself, thinking that love meant self-sacrifice, that kindness meant always saying yes, even when your heart said no. You stretched yourself thin trying to be everything for everyone, believing that your worth was tied to your usefulness. But slowly, through the lessons of pain and exhaustion, you began to see that peace cannot exist where boundaries are not honored. Healing teaches you that protecting your energy is an act of love, not selfishness. It is the deep understanding that you are responsible for how you allow others to treat you. At first, it feels uncomfortable. The word no catches in your throat. You worry that people will misunderstand, that they'll see your silence as distance, your distance as coldness. You fear being labeled difficult or unkind. But healing brings courage. It teaches you that you are not here to shrink for the comfort of others. You are here to live truthfully, even when your truth inconveniences someone else. You begin to recognize how often you said yes out of fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being unloved. But the more you honor your boundaries, the more you realize that those who truly care for you will never ask you to betray yourself to keep them close. You start small, declining an invitation when you need rest, stepping away from conversations that drain you, refusing to explain your choices when they come from a place of peace. And slowly, you feel your strength returning. You realize that boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are doors that you control, allowing only what nourishes your soul to enter. You no longer need to justify your peace to anyone. You understand that love without respect is not love, it's dependency. And respect begins with how you respect yourself. You begin to notice that your relationships shift. Some grow deeper, more genuine, built on mutual understanding. Others fade, and though that brings sadness, it also brings clarity. You learn that not everyone is meant to stay, and that's okay. You are no longer bending yourself into shapes that do not fit. You stop apologizing for protecting your energy. You stop feeling guilty for prioritizing your well-being. Healing is when you choose your peace, even when it disappoints others. The moment you start setting boundaries without guilt, you reclaim your power. You no longer give from emptiness. You give from overflow. You no longer chase people to prove your worth. You stand firm in it. This is the strength of a healed soul, calm, confident, and compassionate, yet unshakably protective of its peace. You are learning that saying no is not rejection. It is self-respect. There comes a moment when you look back at the past and no longer feel anger tightening your chest. You can revisit the memories that once haunted you and feel a strange calm, a quiet understanding that life unfolded as it needed to. This is one of the clearest signs that you've healed more than you realize. When you can bless the past, not because it was kind, but because it taught you. The pain that once felt unbearable begins to reveal its purpose. You see now that every heartbreak, every loss, every disappointment shaped the person you've become. It built strength where there was once fragility, courage where there was once fear, and wisdom where there was once confusion. For a long time, you may have held resentment toward your story, wishing parts of it had been written differently. You may have replayed moments, wondering what could have changed if you had acted or spoken differently. You may have felt trapped in the weight of regret, but healing is the moment you stop arguing with what cannot be undone. You realize that acceptance is not defeat, it is liberation. You begin to thank the past for its lessons, for its role in shaping your depth and your resilience. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start understanding, "It happened for me," to teach, to refine, to awaken. The people who hurt you no longer occupy space in your heart rent-free. You no longer feel the need to get even, to prove your worth, or to be seen. Instead, you can whisper a blessing for them and mean it, not because they deserve your kindness, but because you deserve your peace. You understand now that forgiveness isn't about excusing what was done. It's about releasing yourself from the grip of pain. When you bless the past, You are not glorifying the struggle. You are recognizing the growth that came from it. You start to see the beauty in your scars. They are no longer reminders of what broke you, but symbols of what survived. Each one tells a story of strength, of endurance, of rising again. You learn to smile at your reflection, seeing not the wounded person you once were, but the healed being you have become. You may still remember the pain, but it no longer controls you. It becomes a part of your wisdom, a quiet teacher that guides you toward gentler choices. And so, when you can look back and give thanks for your journey, the joy and the sorrow alike, you have arrived at a sacred place. You understand that every closed door redirected you, every heartbreak cleansed you, and every ending carried a hidden beginning. To bless the past is to free yourself from its shadow and to stand fully in the light of who you are now. A soul reborn from its own lessons, walking forward with gratitude and grace. When you have truly healed, you begin to walk through the world differently. There is a softness to your presence, but it is not weakness. It is strength wrapped in grace. You no longer need to announce your growth or prove your worth. You move quietly, carrying a calm confidence that comes from surviving storms that others will never know about. The healed soul does not shout about its scars. It simply shines with the light they created. You begin to realize that you do not have to be loud to be powerful. You have learned that peace is a greater display of strength than anger ever was. The healed soul walks with humility. It no longer demands recognition or validation. It understands that true growth is not about being better than anyone else. It is about being better than the person you once were. You look at your past self with compassion, not judgment. You honor the version of you who kept going when everything hurt, the one who cried silently and still showed up. You no longer feel shame for what broke you. Instead, you feel gratitude for what shaped you. The experiences that once made you feel small have now become the very foundation of your wisdom. Healing changes the way you see others too. You stop taking everything personally. You understand that people can only meet you at the level of their own understanding. You no longer rush to correct, convince, or control. You listen more and react less. You see the pain behind someone's anger, the fear beneath their pride, the confusion behind their coldness. Your compassion deepens, but so does your discernment. You can love without losing yourself, help without depleting yourself, and forgive without reopening old wounds. That balance of love and strength, empathy and boundaries is the quiet power of a healed heart. You also stop chasing closure, approval, and explanations. You no longer need everyone to understand your journey. You know that your healing is yours alone, and it does not require applause. You find peace in your solitude and beauty in your stillness. You begin to trust the timing of your life. You stop questioning why things happened the way they did, and instead you see how they led you here, to this deeper, truer version of yourself. Your scars, once a source of pain, become sacred marks of resilience. You see them not as reminders of damage, but as proof of endurance. You wear them like armor, not to defend yourself, but to remind yourself that you have already survived the worst and still found the strength to love again. The healed soul carries no bitterness, only wisdom. It knows that pain may visit, but it will never again take residence. You walk forward not with pride, but with peace. You are living proof that healing does not make you perfect, it makes you whole. And so, my dear one, as you stand here, whole, wiser, softer, and stronger, know this: healing was never about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who you've always been beneath the pain. It was about coming home to yourself, piece by piece, breath by breath. The battles you thought would break you have instead revealed your resilience. The love you thought you lost has returned, not from others, but from within. You have learned to trust your silence, honor your truth, and bless your past. You have become the living proof that healing is not found in forgetting, but in forgiving, not in escaping, but in embracing. Walk forward now with the quiet dignity of someone who has met their own soul and chosen peace. For that, my dear, is the truest kind of freedom.